When her husband died, the house did not grieve. It simply went quiet, not the gentle quiet of sleep or rest, but the heavy kind, the kind that presses against the ears and makes every small sound feel out of place. For years the house had known the rhythm of an old man's life. His slow steps in the corridor, his dry cough in the early mornings, the clink of a spoon against porcelain as he took his medicine. Even silence had carried his presence, and then one morning it didn't. The doctor came, spoke softly, and left. The servants stood in the hallway with their eyes lowered. Neighbors arrived with rehearsed sadness, their words polite and distant. By evening the man was gone, and with him went the last thing tying the house to the past. She stood alone in black, her hands folded, her face calm. People whispered that she was lucky. They said she had been spared old age. They said she had inherited comfort. They said a woman of 40 still had time. None of them asked what it felt like to be married to a man nearly twice her age. None of them asked what it meant to spend her youth beside someone who had already lived his life. The marriage had never been cruel. It had been something quieter than that. Empty. He had chosen her because she was young, obedient, and came from a family that needed the money. She had agreed because there was no better option. That was how things worked in their world. Feelings were luxuries. Security was survival. She had learned early how to be useful and invisible at the same time. When the funeral ended and the last visitor left, the house felt too large for one person. The rooms echoed. The walls seemed to listen. At night, the silence grew so thick it pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. She walked through the house aimlessly, touching furniture she had never chosen, curtains she had never liked, portraits of a man who had owned everything, including her future. Sometimes she stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom and stared at herself as if seeing a stranger. Her hair still held its color. Her skin had not yet surrendered to time. There were lines, yes, but nothing that marked her as old. She looked like a woman who should still be living, not one whose life had already been spent. 40. Too old to dream, they said. Too young to feel finished. The nights were the worst. She lay awake listening to the wind brush against the windows, the soft creak of wood settling, the distant sound of animals beyond the fields. The bed beside her remained cold, untouched. For years she had shared that space with a man whose presence never warmed it. Now even that absence felt unbearable. It was on one of those evenings, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned the color of fading embers, that she saw him. He stood near the edge of her land, uncertain, as though unsure whether he had stepped too far. His clothes were worn, his boots dusty from travel. He carried nothing but a small bundle slung over his shoulder. He looked tired in the way only the truly exhausted do, not just from walking, but from life itself. She watched him from the porch. He hesitated, then lifted his hand in a quiet, uncertain greeting. Something stirred inside her. Not attraction, not yet. Recognition. She stepped forward, and the sound of the door closing behind her made him straighten quickly. He introduced himself, voice low and respectful, said he was looking for work, said he hadn't eaten properly in days. She asked where he planned to sleep. He paused, embarrassed, then answered honestly, "Wherever he could." The words hung in the air between them. She studied him carefully now, the dirt beneath his nails, the tired slump of his shoulders, the way his eyes avoided hers as if he feared being judged. He wasn't dangerous. He wasn't confident. He was simply lost. The decision came to her before she had time to question it. There were empty rooms in the house, food that went untouched, silence that followed her like a shadow. She told him he could stay the night. Just the night. Relief crossed his face so quickly he couldn't hide it. He thanked her more than once, his voice tight with something close to disbelief. She led him inside. The door closed behind them with a sound that felt heavier than it should have been. That night she did not sleep. She lay awake listening, aware of the presence of another person under her roof. The house felt different, warmer somehow, as if it had been waiting for this. She told herself she had done a good thing. That kindness was not dangerous, but even as she thought it, something restless moved beneath the surface of her mind. The next morning she found him already awake, standing in the kitchen as if unsure where he was allowed to be. He offered to help, to clean, to work, anything. She told him to eat. He did so carefully, almost nervously, as though afraid the food might be taken away. She watched him as he ate, the way he tried not to take too much, the way he thanked her again when he finished. It had been a long time since anyone had needed her. She told him he could stay another day, then another. She found small tasks for him, fixing things that barely needed fixing, carrying things she could have moved herself. Excuses, really, reasons to keep him close. And he stayed. At first it felt harmless, comforting even. The house no longer felt so empty. The silence no longer pressed so hard against her chest, but slowly she began to notice changes. She listened for his footsteps in the morning. She felt uneasy when he left the house. She found herself watching the way his hands moved when he worked, the way his shirt clung to his back in the heat. These thoughts unsettled her. She told herself it was loneliness. She told herself it would pass. But loneliness, when ignored, does not fade. It grows. The young man, too, began to feel something he could not name. The kindness no longer felt simple. The way she looked at him lingered a moment too long. The way her voice softened when she spoke to him made his skin prickle with unease. Still he stayed, because he had nowhere else to go, because the food was warm, because the bed was safe, because the world outside felt colder than the one inside these walls, and because he did not yet understand the truth, that the house had already begun to close around him, that her loneliness was no longer quiet, and that the kindness which had saved him was slowly turning into something he would one day fear. The door remained unlocked, but with every passing day leaving felt harder, and neither of them realized that the moment he had stepped inside, something had already been decided. The days began to settle into a rhythm neither of them spoke about. Morning light spilled through the windows in long, pale strips. The house woke slowly, as if reluctant to disturb itself. She rose early, as she always had, but now there was a reason to do so. The sound of another person moving, somewhere beyond her. Bedroom door changed everything. She found herself listening for him before she even realized she was doing it. Some mornings he was already awake, standing near the sink, washing his hands with careful restraint. Other days he waited until she appeared, unsure of the rules that governed this place. He never assumed, never took more than was offered, and that, more than anything, pleased her. She gave him small tasks at first, harmless things, carrying firewood, sweeping the porch, checking the fence along the back field. Things that didn't need doing but felt necessary simply because they gave him purpose. He accepted every task without complaint. He thanked her too often. That alone should have warned him. Meals became routine. She cooked more than she needed, setting 2 plates on the table without thinking about it. At first they ate in silence. Then slowly she began to ask questions. Where he had come from, how long he had been on the road, whether he had family, he answered carefully, choosing his words the way people do when they do not want to appear weak. There had been a job once, then another, both gone. A family he had drifted away from, a town that no longer felt like home. Nothing dramatic, just life narrowing until there was nowhere left to stand. She listened closely, absorbing every detail. There was something comforting about his voice filling the room, about hearing another human story, inside walls that had known only obligation and silence for so long. In the evenings, she poured herself a small glass of wine and sat near the window while he finished his chores. She told herself it was harmless to watch him work, that anyone would notice a young man moving with purpose after years of emptiness. But her eyes lingered longer than they should have. She noticed the way the muscles in his arms tightened when he lifted something heavy, the way sweat darkened the fabric of his shirt, the way he wiped his brow with the back of his hand, unaware of her gaze. She did not touch him. She did not speak of what she felt. But something had begun to wake inside her. At night she lay awake thinking of things she had never allowed herself to want. Things she had buried under duty and obedience, and years of being told what her place was. And in those thoughts the young man was always there, not as a fantasy, not as a lover, as a presence, someone who belonged. Days turned into weeks. He stopped asking when he would leave. She stopped pretending he would. She began to depend on the sound of him in the house, the way he greeted her in the morning, the way he looked at her when he spoke, as if she were someone worth listening to. It filled a space she had not known was empty. But with that comfort came something darker. She noticed herself growing uneasy when he went beyond the gates, when he returned later than expected, when his attention drifted elsewhere. Once he mentioned a town not far away, said there might be work there. The words struck her harder than she expected. That night she barely slept. The next morning, she mentioned how dangerous the roads had become, how people disappeared, how uncertain life was outside the safety of these walls. She spoke softly, not as a warning, but as concern. He listened. He always listened. After that, he stopped talking about leaving. It happened slowly enough that neither of them noticed the change. She began choosing his meals, suggesting when he should rest, deciding which chores mattered most. None of it sounded like orders. It sounded like care. And he accepted it because it made sense, because life was easier when someone else decided things for you, because the world beyond the gates felt colder each time he thought about it. Sometimes she caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. Other times she felt his gaze and pretended not to notice. There was tension between them. Now, unspoken, unnamed, it filled the spaces in their conversations and lingered in the air long after they had gone to their separate rooms. One evening a storm rolled in. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows. The sky cracked open with thunder. She sat in the parlor staring at the fire when she heard footsteps behind her. He stood there, hesitant, unsure whether to speak. She turned to him slowly. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then she told him to sit. He obeyed. They sat in silence as the storm passed, the fire burning low between them. Their shoulders nearly touched. The space between them felt charged, alive with things neither of them dared to name. When he finally rose to leave, she did not stop him. But the look in her eyes lingered long after he closed the door behind him. That night, neither of them slept, and something changed. From that moment on, the house no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a place that expected something in return. Neither of them said it aloud, but both of them understood. What had begun as kindness had crossed into something else. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back. The house had a way of remembering things. It remembered footsteps long after they stopped echoing. It remembered voices even when no one spoke. It remembered the weight of a life lived inside its walls, and the emptiness that followed when that life ended. For years it had known only one presence, one rhythm, one shadow moving from room to room. Now there were two, and the walls seemed to listen more closely than before. Morning came slowly, filtered through thin curtains that softened the light before it touched the floor. He woke earlier than usual, not because he needed to, but because sleep no longer held him the way it once had. There was a tension inside him now, a quiet awareness that refused to settle. He lay still, listening. The house was awake. He could hear movement somewhere down the hall, the faint clink of porcelain, the scrape of a chair being moved across wood. Sounds that had once felt distant now carried weight. He waited longer than he needed to before getting up. When he finally stepped into the hallway, the air felt different, thicker, as if something unseen had passed through, moments before he arrived. She was in the kitchen, her back to him. The window was open, letting in a breeze that lifted the edges of her dress slightly. The light caught the strands of her hair, revealing threads of silver he hadn't noticed before. She stood still, hands resting on the counter as though lost in thought. He hesitated. Then he spoke her name. She turned slowly. Her expression softened when she saw him, but there was something else beneath it now. Something deliberate, something that lingered a fraction of a second too long. "Good morning," she said. Her voice carried warmth but also expectation. He returned the greeting and moved to the table, sitting where he always did. She poured coffee, the sound filling the space between them. When she placed the cup in front of him, her fingers brushed his hand. This time she did not pull away quickly. The contact was brief, but it sent a quiet jolt through him. Not desire exactly, more like awareness, the sudden knowledge that he was being noticed in a way he hadn't been before. She took her seat across from him, watching as he drank. Her eyes followed the movement of his hands, the way his jaw shifted as he swallowed. Neither of them spoke. Silence settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. It felt intentional, like a pause waiting to be filled. He was the first to break it. "I can go into town today," he said. "Pick up what we need." Her expression changed slightly. "You don't have to," she replied. "You've done enough." The words were gentle, but something in her tone suggested finality. He hesitated. "I don't mind." "I know," she said, "but you shouldn't feel like you owe me anything." The way she said it made the words feel untrue. He nodded anyway. She rose and began clearing the table. As she moved past him, her hand brushed his shoulder. Not accidentally, not quickly. It lingered. He stiffened, unsure how to react. She didn't acknowledge it. Instead, she continued on as if nothing had happened. But the air between them had changed. The day passed slowly. He worked outside, repairing what didn't need fixing, moving with restless energy. Every so often he glanced toward the house, half expecting to see her watching from a window. Sometimes she was, sometimes she wasn't. But the feeling of being observed never left him. When evening came, clouds rolled in, heavy and low. The sky darkened early, casting long shadows across the land. He finished his work later than usual, stalling without knowing why. Inside, the lamps were already lit. She sat in the parlor, a book open in her lap, though she wasn't reading. Her eyes lifted as soon as he entered. "You're late," she said softly. "Lost track of time," he replied. She closed the book and set it aside. "Come sit." He hesitated. The chair beside her was closer than he liked, close enough that their shoulders might touch if he leaned the wrong way. Still he sat. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. She spoke without looking at him. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I haven't thought much about it." She turned to him then, studying his face as if searching for something hidden beneath the surface. "You could," she said. "Any time." He nodded. "But you haven't," she added. "No," he admitted. "Why?" He opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. The truth felt complicated. It wasn't just the food or the shelter. It wasn't just the comfort of routine. It was the way the world outside seemed distant now, unfamiliar, the way this place had slowly wrapped itself around him. "I guess I don't see a reason to," he said finally. Her gaze softened. "That's what I thought," she said quietly. She shifted closer, just enough that their arms brushed. He felt the warmth of her through the fabric of his shirt. His breath caught, though he tried not to show it. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she spoke again. "Do you know what it's like," she said, "to be chosen only because it's convenient?" He looked at her. "My husband chose me because it made sense," she continued. "Because it fit his life, not because he wanted me." Her voice was steady, but something trembled beneath it. I spent years telling myself that was enough. That security mattered more than affection. That wanting more was selfish. She turned toward him fully now. "But when someone looks at you," she said, "really looks at you, you remember what it feels like to be seen." He didn't know how to respond. He felt exposed, as though her words were aimed directly at him. "You look at me," she said softly, "even when you think I don't notice." His throat tightened. "I don't mean," he began. She raised a hand, stopping him. "I'm not accusing you," she said. "I just want you to be honest." Silence stretched between them. The clock ticked loudly in the background. "I don't know what you want me to say," he admitted. She leaned closer. "I want you to tell me you're here because you want to be," she said. "Not because you feel you have to be." He searched her face. The longing there was unmistakable now. "I am," he said quietly. "I want to be here." The moment the words left his mouth, something shifted. Her breath caught. Her hand moved to his arm, fingers curling slightly into the fabric of his sleeve. Not gripping, just enough to feel him there. "Then stay," she said, not as a request, as a statement. He should have pulled away. He should have said something sensible, something careful. But instead, he stayed where he was. They sat like that for a long time, too long, close enough that the air between them felt charged, alive with things neither dared to name. Eventually she stood. "You should get some rest," she said softly. He nodded, standing as well. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "Thank you," she said. He turned back. "For staying," she added. He didn't answer. He went to his room, closing the door behind him, leaning against it as if he needed the support. His heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts tangled and restless. Across the hall she remained where she was, staring at the empty space he had left behind. Her hands trembled slightly. She told herself she had done nothing wrong. She had not touched him improperly. She had not said anything inappropriate. She had only spoken the truth. Yet deep down she knew she had crossed a line. And worse, she knew she wanted to cross it again. That night's sleep came slowly. He lay awake, replaying every word, every glance, every moment of silence. The house felt smaller now, as if the walls had shifted closer together. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts circling endlessly. For the first time since her husband's death, she did not feel alone. And for the first time the thought frightened her, because loneliness had once been her greatest pain. Now the idea of losing him felt far worse. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Inside, something fragile and dangerous continued to grow. Neither of them knew it yet. But the balance had already shifted, and once it had, there was no returning to what things had been before. The rain did not stop that night. It fell steadily, without anger or mercy, as if the sky itself had decided to linger over the house and watch what unfolded inside. The sound of it pressed against the walls, against the windows, against the silence that had settled between them. He woke before dawn, his body tense, his mind already restless. For a moment he lay still, staring at the ceiling. The events of the previous day replayed themselves in his thoughts with an uncomfortable clarity. Her voice, her eyes, the way she had stood too close, the way he had not moved away. He turned onto his side and stared at the door. The house felt different now, smaller, closer, as if the walls had shifted during the night. He got up quietly, careful not to make a sound as he stepped into the hallway. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet, the noise louder than he expected in the stillness. He paused, listening. Somewhere down the hall a door closed softly. He froze. Then he heard footsteps, slow, measured. She appeared at the end of the corridor, wrapped in a robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. She stopped when she saw him, surprise flickering across her face before settling into something calmer. "You're up early," she said. "So are you," he replied. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hallway felt narrow, the distance between them far too short. The air carried the faint scent of the soap she used, something clean and understated. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Neither could I." Their words fell into the silence, heavy with things left unsaid. She gestured toward the kitchen. "I was going to make tea." He nodded. "I'll help." They walked together, side by side, not touching, yet acutely aware of each other's presence. The kitchen light cast a soft glow over the room, turning the shadows gentle rather than harsh. She moved with practiced ease, filling the kettle, placing cups on the table. He watched her hands as she worked, steady but not entirely calm. When she reached for a cup, their fingers brushed. This time neither of them pulled away immediately. The contact lasted a second longer than necessary. Then she stepped back as if startled by her own boldness. "Sit," she said quietly. He did. The kettle began to whistle, its sound cutting through the tension. She poured the water, steam rising between them like a barrier. When she handed him the cup, her hand trembled slightly. He noticed. She noticed that he noticed. They sat in silence, drinking slowly. The rain continued outside, tapping against the windows in a steady rhythm. "You don't have to stay," she said suddenly. He looked up. "What?" "I mean, you don't owe me anything," she continued. "You can leave whenever you want." Her voice was calm, but there was something strained beneath it. He studied her face. "So you've said that before," he replied, "but it doesn't feel true." She looked away. "I don't want you to feel trapped," she said. He hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I don't feel trapped." She turned back to him. "Then what do you feel?" The question hung between them. He searched for the right words, but none of them felt safe. "I feel confused," he said finally. "About you, about this place, about myself." Her expression softened. "I know," she said quietly. "I feel it too." They sat with that truth between them, neither rushing to fill the space. After a moment she stood and began clearing the table. He rose to help, but she shook her head. "No," she said. "Sit." He hesitated, then obeyed. She moved around the kitchen, her movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. When she finished, she leaned against the counter, facing him. "You should know something," she said. He waited. "I didn't plan for any of this," she continued. "When you came here, I thought you'd stay a few days. Maybe a week. I told myself I was just helping." Her voice wavered slightly, but somewhere along the way it stopped being about helping. He swallowed. "What did it become?" he asked. She looked at him directly. "Company," she said. "Comfort, and then something I didn't expect." He didn't interrupt. "I spent years being invisible," she went on. "Married to a man who needed me but never wanted me. Living in a house that felt more like a duty than a home." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "When he died, I told myself I was free. But freedom is a strange thing when you've never really had it." The silence was unbearable. Her gaze dropped to her hands. "Then you arrived." He felt his chest tighten. "I didn't mean to depend on you," she said. "It just happened." He stood slowly, drawn toward her without quite realizing it. "You didn't force anything," he said. "I stayed because I wanted to." She looked up at him, eyes searching. "Are you sure?" "Yes." The word came out stronger than he expected. They stood facing each other now, close enough to feel the warmth of each other's bodies. The tension between them was no longer subtle. It pressed against them, undeniable. Her breath caught slightly. "Then tell me something," she said softly. "If you walked out that door right now, would you miss me?" He didn't answer immediately. He thought about the empty road, the uncertain future, the way the house felt alive now, filled with presence and meaning. "Yes," he said. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "That's what I was afraid of," she whispered. Before he could ask why, she stepped closer, not touching him, just close enough to make retreat difficult. "I don't want to lose you," she said, "and I don't know how to want you in a way that's right." His breath grew shallow. "I don't know either," he admitted. For a moment it seemed as though she might reach for him again. Instead, she stepped back. "You should go outside," she said softly. "Clear your head." He hesitated. "Go," she repeated. He nodded slowly and turned toward the door. As he reached for the handle, her voice stopped him. "Stay today," she said. "At least today." He turned back. Their eyes met. He nodded. "I'll stay." Something shifted in her expression, relief mixed with something darker. He stepped outside, the cool air hitting his face. The rain had slowed to a mist, the world washed clean and heavy with the smell of wet earth. He stood there for a long moment, trying to steady himself. Inside, she remained where she was, hands trembling at her sides. She had crossed a line. Not by touch, not by words, but by allowing herself to need him, and now there was no pretending otherwise. The house, once silent and empty, felt full. Not with comfort, but with expectation, and both of them knew that whatever came next would change everything. Night settled fully over the house, pressing against the windows like a quiet witness. The lamps burned low, casting long, uneven shadows that stretched across the walls and floor. The air felt heavy, not with heat, but with everything that had been left unsaid. He stood near the doorway, still feeling the echo of her presence, the weight of the moment they had shared lingering in his chest like a slow, steady ache. She had gone to her room, but the house did not feel empty. It felt alert, as if it were waiting. He moved slowly through the hallway, his steps cautious, as though sound itself might disturb something fragile. Every creak of the floorboards felt louder than it should have been. His thoughts circled endlessly, returning again and again to the same truth he was trying to avoid. He had not left. Not when he had the chance. Not when he knew he should have. Instead, he had stayed. And staying had changed something. He reached his room and closed the door quietly behind him. The space felt smaller than before, the walls closer, the ceiling lower. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor. His mind replayed her words, her voice, the way she had looked at him when she thought he might walk away. He knew that look. It was the look of someone who had already lost too much. Sleep did not come easily. When it did, it was shallow and restless, filled with fragments of dreams that made no sense. Her face, the sound of rain, a door closing somewhere far away. He woke before dawn, his heart already racing. For a moment he lay still, listening. The house was quiet, too quiet. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face, trying to shake the heaviness that clung to him. The early light filtered faintly through the curtains, turning the room grey and indistinct. He dressed without thinking and stepped into the hallway. The door to her room was closed. He paused there longer than he meant to, staring at it, aware of how thin the wood was, how easily sound could pass through it. He wondered if she was awake, if she was thinking the same thoughts he was. He forced himself to move. In the kitchen, the kettle sat cold on the stove. He filled it with water and lit the flame, grateful for something simple to do with his hands. The familiar motion steadied him slightly. When the kettle began to whistle, he poured the water into a cup and stood there, staring into the steam as if answers might rise from it. That was when he heard her. Soft footsteps in the hallway. He turned. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked tired. Not physically, but in a deeper way, the kind of exhaustion that comes from holding yourself together for too long. They looked at each other in silence. Neither smiled. "Good morning," he said quietly. She nodded. "Morning." Her voice was steady, but there was something fragile beneath it. She stepped into the kitchen, keeping a careful distance between them. He noticed it immediately. The space she left felt deliberate, as though she were trying to undo what had happened the night before. He didn't know whether to be relieved or disappointed. "You didn't sleep much," she said. "Neither did you," he replied. She gave a small, humorless smile. "No." They stood there, unsure of what to do next. Finally, she moved toward the counter and began to prepare breakfast. The normalcy of the act felt almost strange after everything that had happened. The sound of dishes, the scrape of a chair, the low hum of the stove, all of it felt like a reminder of a life that was supposed to be simple. "I don't have to stay today," she said suddenly, without looking at him. He froze. "What?" he asked. "You've already helped more than enough," she continued. "If you want to go, you can." The words were careful, too careful. He studied her face, searching for what she wasn't saying. "You don't want me here?" he asked. She stopped what she was doing and turned to face him. "That's not what I said." "Then what are you saying?" She hesitated, choosing her words. "I'm saying that last night changed things," she said quietly. "And I don't want you to feel like you're staying because you owe me something." He stepped closer. "I'm not staying because I owe you," he said. "Then why are you staying?" she asked. The question hit harder than he expected. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The truth felt too complicated to explain. "Because when I think about leaving," he said slowly, "it doesn't feel right." Her eyes softened, but there was fear there too. "That doesn't mean it's the right choice," she said. "No," he admitted, "but it's the honest one." She looked away, her jaw tightening. "I don't want to trap you," she said. "I've spent my whole life feeling trapped, so I wouldn't do that to someone else." "You're not trapping me," he replied. "I'm here because I choose to be." The words hung between them. She studied his face, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. "You don't understand what that means," she said quietly. "Then tell me," he replied. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping as if she had been holding them tense for hours. "It means responsibility," she said. "It means expectations. It means people getting hurt." He nodded. "I know." "Do you?" she asked. "Because I don't think you do." "Not yet." Her voice wasn't sharp. It was tired. She turned back to the stove, stirring something that didn't need stirring. "I was married for years," she continued, "to a man who needed control more than companionship. I learned how to make myself small, how to accept things I didn't want, because it was easier than fighting." He listened, saying nothing. "When he died," she went on, "I thought I'd feel relief, freedom, something like that." She laughed softly, without humor. "All I felt was empty." She turned to face him again. "And then you came along, and suddenly there was noise in the house again. Movement, another heartbeat." Her voice wavered slightly. "I don't want to turn you into something you're not," she said. "I don't want to make you stay because I'm afraid of being alone." He stepped closer, slowly, carefully. "You're not making me do anything," he said. "I'm choosing this." Her eyes searched his. "For now," she said. "But what about later?" He hesitated. "I don't know what later looks like," he admitted. "But I know what now feels like." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then we need rules," she said. "Rules?" he repeated. "Yes," she said firmly. "Boundaries. If you're going to stay, we do this carefully." He frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means no pretending this is something it's not," she said. "No promises, no expectations, and no crossing lines," he added. She met his gaze. "Yes," she said. "Especially that." They stood there, the agreement hanging between them like a fragile truce. For a moment, it felt like they might actually manage it, like they could walk the line without falling over it. But even as the thought crossed his mind, he knew how fragile it was. Because beneath the words, beneath the rules, something else had already taken root, something neither of them could undo. She turned away first, returning to the stove. "Eat," she said softly. "You need your strength." He sat at the table, watching her move around the kitchen. The way she carried herself had changed. She was more guarded now, more controlled. But there was something else there, too. Something watchful. They ate in silence. When he finished, he stood and carried his plate to the sink. Their hands brushed again, accidentally this time. And both of them pulled away immediately. The tension returned, sharp and undeniable. "I'm going to check the fence," he said, needing space. She nodded. "All right." He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky pale with early morning light. He walked along the fence line, his thoughts restless. Every few steps he glanced back at the house. It looked the same as it always had. But he knew better. Inside, she stood at the window, watching him go. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. She had told herself she would keep control. She had told herself she would not repeat the past. But the truth pressed in on her from all sides. She didn't just want his company. She needed it. And that realization frightened her more than loneliness ever had. As he disappeared around the side of the house, she closed her eyes briefly, drawing in a slow breath. This was only the beginning. And deep down, she knew that whatever came next would not be gentle. The house had changed its sound. It was subtle at first, something neither of them could name, but both could feel. The old walls no longer echoed with emptiness. Every step carried weight now. Every door closing seemed louder, heavier, as if the house itself had begun paying attention to what was unfolding inside it. He noticed it most in the evenings, that hour when daylight thinned and shadows stretched across the floors, when the world outside grew quiet and the inside grew restless. She had stopped pretending nothing was happening. Not openly, not with words, but in the way she no longer avoided his eyes, in the way she lingered a moment too long when passing him in the hallway, in the way her voice softened when she called his name. He felt it all, and it unsettled him more than any confrontation could have, because silence gave permission. One evening, he found her in the sitting room, the lamps lit low, the curtains drawn even though the sky outside was still pale. She sat on the couch, one leg crossed over the other, a glass resting untouched on the table beside her. She did not look surprised to see him. "You're late," she said calmly. "I was fixing the fence near the orchard," he replied. She nodded, as if she had known already. "Come sit," she said. He hesitated, not because of fear, but because of certainty. He knew that if he sat down, something would shift again, something that would not return to its old place. But he sat, not beside her, across from her. The distance felt deliberate, almost defensive. She studied him in silence for a long moment, her gaze moving slowly, thoughtfully, as though memorizing details she might not see again. "You've changed since you came here," she said at last. "So have you," he replied without thinking. Her lips curved slightly, not a smile, something quieter. "Yes," she said. "I suppose I have." The room grew heavy with unspoken meaning. She leaned back into the couch, one hand resting along the armrest, fingers relaxed. There was something unguarded in her posture now, something that hadn't been there before. "I spent many years," she said, "being looked at but never seen." He didn't answer. "I was admired," she continued, "envied, chosen, but never wanted in the way that makes a woman feel alive." Her voice did not tremble. It was steady, reflective, almost distant. "My husband. He wanted security, respect, a name to carry into old age. He did not want me." She paused, then looked directly at him. "And when he died, I thought the silence would kill me." He swallowed. "You don't have to talk about this," he said quietly. "Yes, I do," she replied, "because you're the first person who has listened without obligation." Her words settled heavily between them. He could feel the pull now, unmistakable, like a tide drawing him closer, without ever touching him. "You look at me differently," she said, "not like I'm something to be owned or preserved." He didn't deny it. "I don't know how I look at you," he said finally. "I just know it's not the same as before." That honesty seemed to crack something in her. She leaned forward, elbows resting on her knees, her voice lower now. "I've spent years being untouched," she said. "Not just physically, emotionally. I forgot what it felt like to be seen as a woman." The word hung in the air. Woman. Not widow. Not property. Not memory. Woman. Her eyes did not leave his. "And now," she continued, "I feel it again. And I don't know how to make it stop." He should have stood up then. He should have walked away, reminded himself of the imbalance between them, of the danger of the future this path would steal from him. But instead he stayed seated, still silent, and that silence gave her an answer. She rose slowly from the couch. Each step toward him was measured, careful, as if she were testing ground that might collapse beneath her. When she stopped in front of him, she did not touch him. She only looked down at him. "You don't have to do anything," she said softly. "I just need to know I'm not imagining this." His breath came slower now. "I don't think you are," he said. That was all it took. Her hand lifted, trembling slightly, and brushed against his jaw. The touch was brief, barely there, but it carried months of restraint, loneliness and unspoken need. He did not pull away. The room seemed to close in around them. For a moment, neither moved. Then she stepped back. Just one step. Her face had changed. The softness was still there. But something else had surfaced beneath it. Resolve. "This can't be innocent anymore," she said, "and I won't pretend it is." He nodded. "I know." She exhaled slowly, as if releasing something she had held for years. "And then we must be careful," she said, "because once we cross that line, there is no returning to who we were." That night they did not touch again. But something far more dangerous had already happened. They had acknowledged the truth. From that evening on, everything shifted. Their conversations grew quieter, more deliberate. Their silences grew heavier. Every shared glance carried memory, suggestion, and restraint. He began to notice how often she positioned herself near him without reason, how she found excuses to ask his opinion, how her voice softened when they were alone. She noticed how he lingered before leaving a room, how his eyes followed her without shame now, how his restraint began to look less like virtue and more like fear. The house felt smaller, the days slower, the air thicker, and beneath it all a tension that refused to fade. Neither of them spoke of boundaries anymore, because both knew they were already standing on the wrong side of them. The change did not arrive suddenly. It crept in quietly, like a shift in weather that no one notices until the air feels heavier and breathing takes effort. By the next morning, the house no longer felt neutral. It felt aware. He sensed it the moment he woke, before his eyes even opened. The silence had weight to it now, pressing against his chest, reminding him of the conversation from the night before. Her words echoed in his mind, not as sound but as meaning. There was no confusion left between them. Whatever stood unspoken had already taken shape. He went about his chores slower than usual. Every movement felt deliberate, as if his body knew something his mind was still trying to avoid. The sun climbed higher, light spilling across the yard, yet the warmth did nothing to ease the tension inside him. When he finally entered the house again, she was already awake. She sat at the dining table, papers neatly arranged in front of her, but it was clear she had not been reading. Her gaze lifted the moment she heard him. There was no hesitation this time, no pretending. "Come here," she said quietly. Not a command, not a request, an invitation. He walked toward her, his step steady but his pulse loud in his ears. She studied him the way one studies something fragile and valuable, as if deciding how much pressure it could bear before breaking. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Neither did you," he replied. A faint smile crossed her face, one that held no joy, only recognition. She gestured to the chair across from her. He sat. For a long moment they simply looked at one another. "You know," she said, "I used to believe loneliness came from being alone." She folded her hands on the table, fingers interlacing slowly. "But it doesn't. It comes from being unseen." He said nothing. He didn't need to. "I lived in a house full of people once," she continued. "Servants, guests, a husband who was always present in body but never in spirit. And I felt more invisible then than I ever have here." Her voice tightened slightly. "And now you're here. And suddenly everything I buried feels awake again." She paused, as if measuring how much truth she could allow herself to speak. "I don't know if that frightens me more, or if losing it would." He felt the weight of her words settle deep in his chest. "You shouldn't feel like that because of me," he said carefully. "But I do," she replied, and pretending otherwise would be a lie. The honesty in her voice stripped away any illusion of safety. She stood slowly and walked toward the window. Light traced the edges of her figure, catching in her hair, softening the lines of her face. She did not look at him as she spoke again. "I've spent my life being careful, making choices that kept things stable, respectable, predictable." She turned to face him. "And I've never felt more alive than I do now, standing in a room with a man who should not matter this much." His throat tightened. You don't know what you're asking of me, he said. Her gaze sharpened. I'm not asking, she replied. I'm acknowledging what already exists. Silence stretched between them, thick and loaded. He stood then slowly, as though afraid any sudden movement might shatter something fragile. You have more power here than you realize, he said. Over me, over this whole situation. She studied him carefully. And you think I don't know that? She asked. You think I don't feel the weight of it every time I look at you? Her voice softened again. That's why I haven't touched you. Not really, because I don't want this to be something taken. She stepped closer. I want it to be something chosen. The words settled into him, heavy and irreversible. He closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering the strength to speak. You're asking me to cross a line I can't uncross, he said. Yes, she replied simply. When he opened his eyes, something in her expression shifted. Not desire alone, something deeper, something that frightened him more. Need, not physical. Emotional, human. And that was what made it dangerous. He took a slow breath. If I stay, he said, things will change. They already have, she answered. They stood inches apart now. No touching, no movement. Just the quiet recognition of what lay between them. For a moment, it felt as though time itself had slowed, waiting to see which of them would break first. It was her. She turned away suddenly, pressing her palm against the table as if steadying herself. I shouldn't be doing this, she said softly. I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone have this kind of hold over me again. He watched her, conflicted. Then don't, he said. She laughed quietly, a sound empty of humor. It's too late for that. She faced him again, her eyes darker now, more resolved. I don't want you to leave, she said, and I don't want to pretend that this is something it isn't. He felt something shift inside him at her words. A line giving way, a boundary loosening. What do you want then? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence, close enough that the space between them felt electric. I want honesty, she said, even if it costs us both. He searched her face, trying to find doubt. There was none. Only loneliness, desire, and a certainty that frightened him more than any threat could have. I don't know how this ends, he said quietly. She held his gaze. Neither do I. The moment stretched. Then, without touching him, she stepped past him and moved toward the door. I need time, she said, to think, to breathe. She paused with her hand on the handle. But don't mistake distance for retreat, she added, because I've already crossed a line inside myself. She left the room, leaving him alone with the weight of her words. That night the house felt impossibly large. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every look, every word, every pause. The realization settled slowly but firmly in his chest. This was no longer about desire. It was about power, about need, about two people standing at the edge of something that would change them both, whether they stepped forward or not. And deep down he knew something else. Whatever came next would not be gentle. It would not be clean, and it would not be forgotten. The morning arrived without ceremony. No thunder, no storm, no sign that anything in the world had shifted. And yet everything had. He woke before sunrise, the pale light barely reaching the edges of the room. For a long time he lay still, listening to the house breathe. It had a rhythm now, a low creak in the beams, a distant settling in the walls, as if it too were awake and waiting. He did not know what he expected to feel. Guilt, perhaps, fear, anticipation. What he felt instead was clarity, not comfort. Not peace, clarity. The kind that comes when a person finally understands that something cannot be undone, only endured. He dressed quietly and stepped into the hallway. The house was silent but not empty. Her presence lingered in every corner. He could feel it in the air, in the way the light fell across the floor, in the faint scent that clung to the curtains. He went outside. The morning was cool, the grass damp beneath his shoes. He worked for a while without purpose, fixing nothing, pacing more than doing. His thoughts returned to her again and again, not to her body, not to desire, but to the look in her eyes when she had spoken the night before. Not hunger, need, and something else beneath it, something that made his chest tighten. Possession. When he finally returned inside, the house was awake. She stood near the window in the sitting room, dressed simply, her hair pulled back, her posture calm but deliberate. She did not turn when she heard him enter. "You didn't sleep," she said. "No," he replied. She nodded, as though that confirmed something she already knew. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she turned. There was no softness in her expression now, no uncertainty. What he saw instead was resolve, a decision made and accepted. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what this is, and what it can become." He waited. "I won't pretend I don't feel it," she continued, "but I also won't let it destroy what little control I have left over my life." She stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. "You matter to me," she said, "but I will not beg for you, and I will not lose myself." He searched her face for hesitation. There was none. "I don't want to leave," he said quietly. Her eyes softened just slightly. "And I don't want you to," she replied. "But wanting is not the same as owning." The word hung between them. "Owning." She took a breath. "My husband believed possession was the same as love," she said. "He believed money could replace affection, that authority could substitute care." Her voice hardened. "I will not become that." He felt something loosen inside him. "I don't want to be owned," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why this must change." She walked past him and sat down, motioning for him to do the same. He obeyed, though he did not know why. Perhaps because part of him still wanted her to guide him. Perhaps because part of him feared what would happen if she didn't. "We've been circling something dangerous," she said. "And if we don't name it, it will consume us." She looked directly at him. "This cannot be about escape, or loneliness, or filling a space someone else left behind." He listened silent. "If anything happens between us," she continued, "it must be chosen freely, not out of need, not out of imbalance." He nodded slowly. "And if it doesn't?" he asked. Her gaze did not waver. "Then you leave," she said, "with your dignity intact, and I remain here alone but unchanged." The finality in her voice struck him harder than anger ever could. "You'd let me go," he said. "Yes." Not coldly, not cruelly, simply truthfully. He realized then what he had not allowed himself to see before. This was not a woman losing control. This was a woman reclaiming it. Silence settled between them again, but it was different now, heavier, more honest. "I don't know what the right choice is," he admitted. She studied him for a long moment. "Neither do I," she said, "but I know what the wrong one is." She stood. "This house will not become a cage," she said. "Not for you, not for me." He watched her walk toward the door, her step steady, her back straight. There was no drama in her movement, no plea for him to follow. And that, more than anything, made his chest tighten, because for the first time she was not reaching for him. She was letting him choose. He stood there long after she had left the room. The weight of that freedom pressed down on him, harder than any command ever could. Hours passed. The sun climbed and fell again, casting long shadows across the floors. He moved through the house as if in a dream, touching familiar objects that suddenly felt distant. Every corner held memory now. Every silence echoed with what had almost been said. As evening approached, he found her again. She was in the garden, kneeling beside a row of flowers, her hands in the soil. The image struck him with unexpected force. She looked calm, grounded, real. He stood there for a long moment before speaking. "I've made a decision," he said. She did not look up immediately. "I thought you might," she replied. He stepped closer. "I can't stay if this becomes about dependency," he said. "But I can't pretend I feel nothing either." She rose slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. "Then say what you mean," she said. "I mean that if I stay," he said, "it has to be because I choose you, not because I need shelter, not because you're lonely, and not because it's easier than leaving." Her eyes searched his face. "And if you go?" she asked. "Then I go knowing I didn't take advantage of what you offered," he replied. "And you didn't lose yourself trying to keep me." The wind stirred around them, carrying the scent of earth and evening air. She nodded once. "That's all I wanted," she said. "Truth." They stood there, facing each other, the weight of everything unspoken pressing in around them. Slowly, carefully, she reached out. Not to pull him close, just to rest her hand over his. The touch was steady, grounded, real. "No matter what happens next," she said, "this moment will matter." He met her gaze. "Yes," he said, "it already does." They did not kiss. They did not embrace. They simply stood there, hands touching, the world quiet around them. And in that stillness, something rare happened. Not surrender, not possession, but understanding. For the first time since they had met, neither of them was trying to fill a void. They were simply standing at the edge of a choice, aware of its cost, and willing to face it honestly. Whatever came next would not be built on illusion. It would be built on consequence, and that, more than desire, more than loneliness, would shape everything that followed. If you're still here, you already know the truth. Some choices don't hurt right away. They wait. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. More stories like this are coming.